Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. Apple planting roots closer to home. The iPhone maker promising to invest $100 billion in the U.S. CEO Tim Cook made a special trip to the Oval Office.
Did you catch any of it?
Some of it, yeah.
Did you see Tim Cook give President Trump a gift?
Author Walter Isaacson joins us on the new normal between President Trump and America's CEOs.
What he did is a good thing. The notion of, okay, we're going to bring some manufacturing back in America. You have to remember, Steve Jobs was fixated on that.
But Tim Cook isn't the only corporate leader in the president's sights. Intel's Lip Bhutan is now in the hot seat, and so is the company's board.
When the administration says jump, corporate America says how high.
And rideshare Lyft reports its best quarter ever. CEO David Risher joins us.
To a certain extent, look elsewhere if you're looking for weakness, because we're not seeing it.
Plus, Tariff Day is here, and Eli Lilly is out with results from a key weight loss pill trial.
I just can't believe that name wasn't taken already. What is it?
Orforglipron?
You practiced it.
No, hey.
It's Thursday, August 7th, 2025. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand by, Joe. In 3, 2, 1, his mic, cue.
Good morning. Welcome back. Welcome to Squawk Box.
Glad you're here.
I'm here live from the NASDAQ market site. I heard Melissa Lee was going to be in today because Becky is off, and I said, I got to get a haircut. I got to get cleaned up.
I approve.
High and tight. I was able to finally get an appointment. Thank God, because I wanted to look my absolute best. Thank you for being here. Are you doing your show again tonight?
Of course.
The double duty is sometimes people that sit in don't have to do their shows later, but you want to.
My show is my priority.
Your show is your pride and joy. Andrew will be with us. I don't think he's in Aspen now, but he's on his way back, but he's stopping somewhere to do some big interviews. Not a hint of irony when we say slapping on new tariffs, the market up 250 points. And no one's thinking that that's not what you were told would happen, was it, by a lot of people? Anyway, there it is. And Apple is helping both the Dow and the NASDAQ. Treasury yields after Friday still haven't gotten out of this new range that we're in. There's a 10-year at 424. I never talked to you about it, but we had someone that was on Jeremy Siegel. Mm-hmm. For yield inversion purposes, he compares the 10-year to Fed funds. He doesn't do it to the 3-month or the 6-month or the 2-year.
Oh, really?
Which puts us in very restrictive territory. In other words, we're above the Fed funds. The short rate is even above where the 10-year is. I was just wondering what you thought about that. But we got to talk about this other stuff first.
But this is very
I should have
important.
told you about it in Mecca. I should have mentioned that while we were talking about the other stuff.
You're too busy with your hair.
Well, for some reason, the tag was, I had it in front. And, I got to get the tag and the Velcro around back.
Crooked.
People still believe
Pulling
that.
it on.
Yeah. Oh, this is me again. Look, it says.
Oh, yeah, it's you. Sorry.
That's okay. You're ready. Obviously,
Always ready.
You're ready to go. President Trump's tariffs on countries around the world going into effect earlier this morning. A post on Truth Social, the president said, it's midnight. Billions of dollars in tariffs are now flowing into the United States of America. Most imports, though, into the U.S. will face a baseline 10% tariff. Brazil and India are facing 50% levies. Brazil appears to have kicked in now at this point, and India's are set to rise to 50% in a few weeks, and that increase is tied. It's putting pressure on Russia to the U.S., to the country's purchase of Russian oil. Now we're hearing there might even be a meeting, Witkoff said, between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. Switzerland is scrambling, but currently has one of the highest tariff rates at 39%. The Swiss president traveling to the U.S. this week, but so far unable to reach a deal. China and Mexico are in trade limbo for the moment as negotiations with the U.S. continue.
Meantime, President Trump vowing big tariffs on computer chips unless companies manufacture them in the United States. CNBC's Megan Cassella is live in Washington with that. Megan, good morning.
Hey, Melissa, good morning. So really, for the first time, the president offering us last night a preview of just how high he's looking to lift those tariffs on all imports of semiconductors as soon as sometime this month. Take a listen.
will be putting a tariff on of approximately 100% on chips and semiconductors. But if you're building in the United States of America, there's no charge, even though you're building and you're not producing yet in terms of the big numbers of jobs and all of the things that you're building. If you're building, there will be no charge.
So potentially significant exemptions there, guys, especially if any companies even making commitments to build in the U.S., as he later said, will also be excluded. So we do have to see how this is ultimately written. But the list of companies with at least commitments to build here is long, especially after that CHIPS Act rollout last year. That includes Intel, TSMC, IBM, NVIDIA, many, many other big names, all potentially shielded from this move. So a couple notes on these tariffs in the meantime. These would be imposed under Section 232. That requires the Commerce Department to find that semiconductor imports represent a threat to U.S. national security. So I've been told that investigation is expected to wrap up as soon as sometime this month, and tariffs could come very shortly after. So that leaves the big questions now being just how significant any exemptions would be. And then on the other hand, how broadly the tariffs are going to be written and whether, as they could, ultimately include any derivative products such as smartphones or other devices that include semiconductors as well. Guys?
And that's what it sounded like, Megan, this morning, that, for Apple, for instance, they would have an exemption, but there would be some sort of additional levy on those products that use the semiconductors. So is it just semiconductors solely, or do we have an idea as to whether or not in finished products those will face some sort of tax as well?
I think that's going to be the biggest question now after we've heard some of these details from the president. The way that the investigation itself is written, and I've looked at this as they launched it several months ago now. They wrote it so that it could be as broad essentially as they want it to be. It could be any product that includes a semiconductor is also under investigation and ultimately could also face tariffs. That's a very big difference, of course, from it being just chips to anything that includes a chip in it, really shaking the entire technology market if they wrote it that way. We don't know that they would go that aggressive. They could sort of reserve that card and say in the beginning it's only going to be about the chips themselves or something to that effect. But we know that they've at least launched the investigation with that in mind, reserving that possibility, which would then be a big change.
Megan, thanks. Megan Cassella. Yeah. By the way, it's worth noting TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, it is surging, because the trade minister said that it was exempt from these tariffs. So we're seeing huge reactions on the back of that. Meantime, take a look at this. President Trump hosting Apple CEO Tim Cook in the White House yesterday. They announced Apple would invest another $100 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. The investments are aimed at bringing more of Apple's supply chains and manufacturing to the United States, but there was no commitment to make iPhones in the U.S.
Apple's been an investor in other countries a little bit. I won't say which ones, but a couple. And they're coming home.
So I'm proud to say that Apple is leading the creation of an end-to-end silicon supply chain right here in America, from design to equipment to wafer production to fabrication to packaging.
Companies involved in Apple's so-called American manufacturing program include Corning, Applied Materials, Texas Instruments, and Global Foundries, just to name a few. You see all of them up in the after-hour session yesterday on the back of that announcement. It was did you catch any of it?
Some of it, yeah.
Did you see Tim Cook give President Trump a gift? It was it looked like a hunk of gold with like this piece of glass on it. There you go. But it's like on a gold plate. Look at that. That's that's at least gold plated, if not gold.
I've been in the new Oval Office, and there's some gold. There's gold on the ceiling. So that's a Black Keys song, I think. Gold on the ceiling. It is. Now that I think, but there's gold everywhere, and it's beautiful.
So it
does look beautiful, but it's the Trump gold. So yes, it will match very well. What I was thinking was, over the years, and even in the last administration, we've talked about Tim Cook's relationship with President Trump, which he took some flack for at different times. Right. And earlier, at the beginning of this term, he's definitely has a relationship, and I think realizes it's important for Apple to have a relationship with President Trump, when a lot of people probably didn't.
Right.
But recently, who supplanted him as the president's favorite tech mogul was Jensen.
Yeah.
Jensen, 4.3 trillion. Apple, 3.1 trillion. Not surprising, maybe, that Tim Cook was back in the Oval Office.
He had to. And look, look at the investment. $100 billion, additional $100 billion.
On top of the 500, yeah.
Right. But it gained in market cap $150 billion in yesterday's session. And then add to that the 3% that it's gaining in today's session.
And technically,
it's paid for itself already.
It has. And technically, you could have seen it coming, and you probably did on fast money, because the analyst community was finally saying, you know what, I'm ready. I've been thinking Apple's going to be fine, but all year long I've been suffering since the beginning of the year. I think it's finally, things are changing. They're not going to be able, without a new product, they're not going to be able to keep living off the ecosystem and that buzz. And you knew that. The minute people finally said they're going to start throwing in the towel on Apple, you knew it's probably going back to new highs, all-time high. I don't know. I'm not predicting that.
It's still
below.
Well off.
Yeah. Anytime you have, the demise of Apple has been greatly exaggerated, going all the way back.
I agree with that.
Do you know it fell to $9 billion? See, I'm so old, I remember. It fell to a market cap of $9 billion after, I don't know, Gil Amelio was there, or John Scully, they went through.
Even when Tim Cook took over, there were great doubts about Tim Cook.
There was.
How can this operations guy take over Apple and lead it to new heights?
Right.
And he did.
And he did
extremely
but
well.
That doesn't mean that eventually that the skeptics are going to come in and say this time is different, and it's.
Well, the thing is, $600 billion.
What do your traders say? What do your traders say?
It doesn't solve the problem of not being the AI.
I know. What are your in AI? What are your traders saying? Do you know? They all different?
You wouldn't bet against Apple, but there are challenges for the stock.
You got any real hardcore bulls? Any real hardcore bears? Anyone on either side?
Bulls and that, yes, people will hold Apple.
Okay.
Yeah. You can't be more bullish than owning it, right?
I like to watch those guys. They're nimble. They are nimble.
You can join us tonight, Joe.
When you need me, I'll join you. News that we've, been waiting for from Eli Lilly. Got to look at the stock, although we'll show you that Angelica Peebles is here and joins us now. But as you're talking, we should take a quick look at the early morning action in the shares. But take it away.
Yeah, that early morning action, not good. The stock down about 6% right now. And that's after we got this highly anticipated data on its obesity pill, and clearly there's some disappointment. So let's go through the numbers. People lost about 12% of their body weight after a little more than a year at the highest dose. Now, some analysts were looking for more like between 13 and 15%. And why is that 15% important? It's because that's how much people lost weight, how much weight they lost on Novo's Wegovy. And the premise of this pill, or Forglipiron, is that it's a once daily pill that works just as well as the weekly shot Wegovy, so you have an alternative. Now, onto the side effects. About 10% of the people on the highest dose stopped taking the pill because of gastrointestinal issues. Those are things like nausea, vomiting, and that's a bit higher than what we've seen for other GLP-1s. Though the rate of side effects like nausea and vomiting, they are similar to Wegovy, but more surprisingly, 1/4 of patients at the highest dose stopped taking the drug for any reason. Now, we don't know exactly what those reasons are, and we will get the full results at a medical meeting next month. Nonetheless, I did talk to a number of doctors yesterday who are excited about this pill, and that's because they hope that it's easier to make than other GLP-1s, and that should translate it into being cheaper, which might mean that more people can receive these drugs because, of course, right now, access is a big problem. And Lilly is expecting results from one more trial this quarter, and then they plan to file for FDA approval by the end of this year.
So it is a pill. I didn't see the transition from the needles to the pills. So it's in full effect right now for the GLP-1? Because I've seen advertisements that you put drops in something.
No.
That's fake.
We have, no FDA-approved pills at this point for obesity.
Okay. So, but eventually on the way, I would imagine.
This is a pill.
This one, what's wrong
daily
with 12? Yeah, daily pill, 12.
And that's the thing. And that's where I think we have to take a step back, because obviously investors wanted to see more. They wanted to see 15%. And I do think the questions are going to be on the discontinuation. But when you talk to doctors, they say, look, like there was one doctor from UNC that I talked to, and she said right now the alternative is nothing because people aren't getting access. Right. So if it's 12% versus nothing,
if you're seriously obese, 12 might not do it. But if you're just want to lose some weight.
But 12 is better than not having
12%. If you're a
Yes.
200-pound person and you lose 12%, that's 24. That's like exactly what you're trying to do.
The bigger picture here, which is
I think it's the
Lilly is
300-pounder.
down 10%, is because this was the next.
This is going to be the
Holy
next
Grail.
weight.
This was putting Lilly out in front decisively versus Novo in the eyes of investors. And you see Novo shares in the pre-market up pretty strongly. GPCR, Structure Therapeutics, which has a pill
Novo
in the
got
pipeline.
crushed yesterday.
That's also
right?
higher pre-market.
Novo got crushed yesterday, I think, didn't it?
Not crushed, last week. It
Oh,
was
was
a
it
little
last
bit
week?
yesterday.
I thought it
Days
was.
are blending together. But yes,
Yeah, the
still
days-
not great yesterday. But, I mean, this does, I think people saw this pill as a slam dunk. We saw the data earlier this year from that, diabetes trial, and people thought, okay, if you can lose 8% with type 2 diabetes, where we see less weight loss, we're going to see way more here, and we're not. And that's, I think, why you're seeing disappointment. Novo does also have a pill that they're expected to launch at the end of this year, and people have really written it off. Like, nobody's been excited about that.
Right.
But now, if you have, these lackluster results from Lilly, maybe they have more of a case.
I just can't believe that name wasn't taken already. What is it?
Orforglipron?
Orforglipron. That was available? I saw that come up in the. You practiced it.
No, I have a lot of time to talk about it.
Did you see it come up in the telephone? ORFORGLIPRON.
Yeah.
And it was available.
And it was
I would have
available.
snapped that baby up.
Yeah?
Where did they get that? That's the
EMF?
worst pill. That's the worst
Well,
name
that won't
I've
be
ever.
the brand name when it eventually comes out.
I know, but
Surely they'll come up with something snappier like Zepbound or Shot.
All right.
I don't know. I'm not a brand marketer, but
But you play one on TV. No, you actually don't.
In terms of FDA approval, though, and time to market, does this change the expectation of the time frame or no?
No, they're
Just
still
will be-
expecting that they will, once they get that second data set to this quarter, they'll be ready to file by the end of this year. So they're still expecting next year. And again, like talking to doctors yesterday, people were saying it's not a big deal. We're going to overlook that. But again, the premise is just that if this needs to be less expensive than the shots. And so that's what we need to hear from Lilly is truly, will this be the thing that gets this drug into the hands of more people? For them, it's cheaper to make. You don't have all the cold chain requirements.
Right.
So theoretically, this is still a viable option. And I don't want to, downplay that. This is not a failure. This is still a drug that works. But is it as competitive? Is it a slam dunk that people thought? That's the question.
Right. Angelica, thank you. Angelica Peebles.
Next on Squawk Pod, from the corner office to the Oval Office, CEOs at the White House. Tim Cook rebuilding his relationship with President Trump by giving him some of what he wants. Apple has committed to more manufacturing in the U.S. Author and professor Walter Isaacson weighs in.
If we're designing something like Apple phones in California and then throwing them over an ocean to have other people build them, you don't get the feedback loop you have when your engineers and designers are right there watching on the factory floor. That's what Steve Jobs believed in. That's what Elon Musk believed in.
He would know. The Elon Musk and Steve Jobs biographer joins us next. This is Squawk Pod from CNBC. Today with Joe Kernen and Melissa Lee.
President Trump and Apple CEO Tim Cook announcing an additional $100 billion manufacturing deal. Joining us now, CNBC contributor Walter Isaacson. He's written books on Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. When we intro you, Walter, and we start talking about who you've written books, I want to keep going because the list is like mind-boggling. Who else? So Da Vinci, who else?
Jennifer Doudna's the one you got to watch because she's the one who created the gene editing technology, CRISPR.
That's another
gonna
one.
be just as consequential. She's great.
Yeah. You are also an advisory partner at Perella Weinberg and a professor at Tulane University. Can you I know you're next, you wrote about Steve Jobs, but so much about Elon and Apple and everything else. What do you think of Tim Cook's navigating the President Trump and the administration? I think it's pretty
good. He's pretty good. It's very straightforward. He's not one of these emotional people who wants to be the best bro of the president of the United States or somebody who wants to have their hair on fire and be attacking him. And you look at Jamie Dimon, Tim Cook, people who know how to do that. More importantly, what he did is a good thing. The notion of, okay, we're going to bring some manufacturing back in America. You have to remember, Steve Jobs was fixated on that. He was obsessed about building factories in Fremont, California. He even picked the tone of white paint for the walls and the pastels for the machines. In the end, he's ousted. Eventually, it doesn't work, making the manufacturing the machines there. But in America, we lose out on something if we're designing something like Apple phones in California and then throwing them over an ocean to have other people build them. You don't get the feedback loop you have when your engineers and designers are right there watching on the factory floor. That's what Steve Jobs believed in. That's what Elon Musk believed in.
How do we do? Is it feasible? Because that's the headline in just about every paper. The president wants to do it, but it's not feasible to build iPhones in this country. Can we piecemeal go towards that and start doing components? And can we eventually get there?
You can go piecemeal, but in some ways that's not the holy grail, because what Steve Jobs wanted to do was to control parts end to end when he did the original Macintosh, where he made it himself. Likewise, Elon Musk, when he took over Tesla, it had supply chains around the world. It was doing a chassis in England and battery packs in Thailand. He brings it all in. And then you have a better integrated product, and you have people who are designing and engineering it who know what it's like to manufacture it. And the answer to can we do it in America? Of course we can. We can do it. We've always had an ability to do manufacturing. I must admit, it doesn't happen on your show much, but people ought to make mistakes every now and then. For about 30 years, this is the beginning of the 1990s, I was kind of in favor of free trade offshoring. I thought it would increase our wealth. In the end, I think it's important for us to have the capacity to go from the microchip to the phone to the glass on the front of the iPhone, whatever it may be. And in Louisiana, Mississippi, where I grew up, there used to be a lot of manufacturing. It would be great to bring some of that back to America, especially for high-end products.
Where eventually you run into one of the most sacrosanct, theorems in economics is comparative advantage. You have to just throw that out the window. But is there some
necessarily. I'd put my
quasi pseudo? Can we do it some way and still stay faithful to that?
Yeah, obviously there's a tug. The tariffs have downsides, and indeed you want the comparative advantage. But when you have a global supply chain system, and that's what Tim Cook was an expert in when Steve Jobs in the late 90s decided he couldn't build factories in America, didn't want to, he hires Tim Cook, who knows how to orchestrate like a wizard complex supply chains. And yeah, there's an advantage. There's a comparative advantage of each country. You create more wealth. I would not be doing these scattershot, complicated tariffs that Trump is announcing and then unannouncing. But you want to put your finger on the scale and say, if you build in America, you got a 10% advantage, or maybe a 15% advantage. And if you had something like that, you wouldn't be moving a whole lot of manufacturing back to America, but you'd be bringing some, because you say, when we talk comparative advantage, let's put our finger in the scale, just like other countries do.
This is Walter Isaacson 2.0. You've moved this way a little bit.
Well,
right?
I told you that. I mean, I know this always shocks people where you say, well, you said 20 years ago that you were a total free trader and you believed in the Davos Aspen consensus. I look at things. I look at how that created wealth. It was a wonderful system that made us richer. But it also hollowed out the fact that people who could buy a cheap flat screen TV set on a Sunday night at Walmart, they no longer had the chance to get on the bus to go to the factory the next morning and make a decent job. And so, yeah, I applaud a push to move manufacturing back to America, move all sorts of production back to America. I'm not wild about the scattershot way that President Trump is doing it. But I've been, I read Orrin Cass, I've been reading J.D. Vance, others. There is some sense to the fact that maybe those of us who believed in the Aspen Davos consensus that enshrined free trade as almost it was engraved on a tablet from either, a tablet and handed down to us from the gods. No, that didn't help a middle class in America.
Walter, I'm going to jump in here because we're watching Intel stock sink by 3.5% right now. President Trump just posting on Truth Social. The CEO of Intel is highly conflicted and must resign immediately. There is no other solution to this problem. Thank you for your attention to this problem. Again, the stock is down by 3.5%. This, of course, goes back to a letter that was sent to the Intel board chair, Uri, by Senator Tom Cotton, questioning Lip-Bu Tan, the CEO of Intel's, his investments in China prior to being appointed to Intel. Also his ties, of course, to Cadence Design, which he had headed for a decade or so prior to Intel, and its sale of technology to a Chinese military academy. So we're seeing that stock down by 3.8%. So a swift reaction here to this post.
Well, one reaction to that is if you want to take on China, and I don't, as I said, I can support some of these things happening, but I certainly don't like the, shoot first, ask questions later way Trump is doing it. But if you want to make sure you're not as beholden to China, you better start manufacturing chips in America.
That's another reason. So, okay, good. Walter, you're reasonable. You're reasonable. So a lot of these, you would say that there are the latest news from Apple. This is a positive overall for obviously not just so the president can tout a headline, but for Corning it's a positive probably, for Apple, for maybe for the country and our workers.
Look at your iPhone. There was a time when Steve Jobs was inventing that, and he said, I want a really good piece of glass that won't smudge. They said, well, the Claves in China can't do it. He said, well, call Corning. And he called Wendell Weeks at Corning. This is 30-some-odd years ago. And they made a deal to make that Gorilla Glass. And it's important for somebody building a product in which he wants perfection, which means end-to-end control, that you try to do it where you're not just throwing the manufacturing specs across an ocean and hope that what comes back fits into your product.
Walter, you're a contributor and you add so much. Next time you come in here, I'm going to have a little thing for you, a little gold bar with a little little glass disc put in it. There it is.
There it is.
How much does that weigh?
But that's
Walter?
Corning. And we got to remember, you say you can't manufacture. Tesla gets manufactured. Starship gets manufactured. And Wendell Weeks, after 30 or 40 years, is making the best types of glass. And maybe it's a good idea. Maybe that's why Corning, New York can be Corning, New York.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for your positivity, Walter Isaacson.
Have to be an antidote to some of the people come on your show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tease will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, the CEO of Lyft sits down with Andrew Ross Sorkin in San Francisco. The company has just reported its best quarter ever, but Lyft and its competitors are still figuring things out.
It's still a new industry. This is crazy. Rideshare, it's been around for a decade. It sounds like forever. A decade ago, it was nothing.
Keeping riders and drivers safe right after this. You're listening to Squawk Pod.
Up and Andrew, Q.
You are watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin in San Francisco this morning, along with Joe Kernen and Melissa Lee at the NASDAQ market site in New York. Good morning to you both.
Where are you in San Francisco, Andrew? You got that?
I am in San Francisco. It is beautiful. I got the clock tower right over here. I've actually never been in this studio. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And feels very much like the NASDAQ, actually, with just the glass and everything. It's lovely here.
Awesome. I like the look, too.
President Trump posting on Truth Social in just the last hour. The CEO of Intel is highly conflicted and must resign immediately. There is no other solution to this problem. Thank you for your attention to this problem. The stock had been down as much as 4% pre-market, now off by 2.5%. Of course, this follows a letter sent to Intel's board head, Frank Uri, from Senator Tom Cotton, wanting some more information about Lip-Bu Tan, the CEO of Intel's, his investments made in China when he was the CEO of Cadence Designs. He was head of that company for about a decade. Andrew, as you know, the company just pled guilty in July to selling some technology to a Chinese military university. So there's that issue there. But it's fascinating that the stock will move. Of course, this puts in question the nascent turnaround that Intel started on with the replacement of Pat Gelsinger with Lift-Bhutan, and also raises the question of how much can President Trump extend his arm into the private sector.
Well, look, the truth is, I don't know how you feel about this. Well, the first part is say, unless we find out he's a spy, and I have no reason to believe that, it's hard to understand, what the position of the administration can be on this. Having said that, at this point, I think you guys were talking about Tim Cook earlier. I think at this point, when the administration says jump, corporate America says how high. And so if you're the board of Intel, almost by default, you are going to have to jump and figure out how high, and how high might be forcing the CEO out. Isn't that what's happening here?
I don't know what will turn out of this, but I do think that Lift-Bhutan deserves the benefit of the doubt here. I mean, I don't think we should assume anything about anybody based on their ties or their nationality, for that matter. Right,
but remember, Intel actually, among companies in America, actually needs the U.S. government at this point because of the CHIPS Act and so many other things. So you're saying they might be more vulnerable. If you're the board of Intel, and your job is to protect the shareholder, and this becomes a very interesting sort of almost a moral philosophical dynamic. Are you supposed to, on principle, stand up and say, no, we don't like what you're saying, Mr. President? Or is there, a fiduciary duty value, if you will, in saying, okay, tell us how high we have to jump and who our next CEO should be? Having said all that, this is not
If the board of Intel was there to protect the shareholders, they need a whole new board.
Well, that's a separate issue.
Immediately.
But that's a different issue. The question is, we talk about industrial policy. Do we want, you've talked about industrial policy, do we want the president making these decisions? Having said that, if there actually is a national security issue, by all means, it is worth raising.
The industrial policy Andrew, the industrial policy was the CHIPS Act. Trying to get things right is not industrial policy.
We are in San Francisco this morning. Lyft reporting its strongest quarter ever. Rides and bookings jumped double digits, but revenue came in just short of estimates. We're going to talk about that and so much more that's going on in this industry. Right now, David Risher is here, Lyft CEO. It's very nice to see you. We saw your biggest competitor just yesterday, Dara, and I want to get into some of that as well. But let's talk about your earnings and also what you think this says to the degree you think you have a pulse of what's happening with the American consumer right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you said, we had our strongest quarter ever. And what that translates into is, not only billions of dollars of rides, but, tens of millions of riders, millions of drivers every single day, using us to get to work, to go to school, so on and so forth. We don't see any softness. So if people are looking for this as sort of in fact, for example, trips to the airport are actually up quarter over quarter, year on year. So look, Lyft has become a part of millions of people's lives. We serve and connect millions of people every single day, and we do it super, super well. And so I think to a certain extent, look elsewhere if you're looking for weakness, because we're not seeing it.
One of the big announcements that you made recently is this partnership with Baidu. And around autonomous vehicles. But outside of the United States, you've always talked about yourself as a domestic player. What happened? What does this actually mean?
Sure. So, I mean, in a sense, it's a bigger story, right? When I took the job on about 2.5 years ago, we were losing money, we were losing share, and we were only in North America. Now we are making money, $993 million of cash, so, printing cash gaining share highest as it's ever been, at least under my tenure. So that's all wonderful. Okay, so once you're in that position, the question is, what else can you do to take what you've done and go bigger? And we decided to go global. As you know, we acquired a company called FreeNow, closed last week. With that, we become a lot more interesting to global partners. And Baidu, the world's largest autonomous vehicle, I think they've got 11 million rides, without a driver. We've been in discussions with those guys, and they said, you know what, let's go to Europe together. Let's bring self-driving cars.
You're watching all the self-driving guys.
Yeah.
And I want to know, stack rank it right now. You got Waymo, Tesla. I don't know what you think of the experiment in Austin. Do you think that's going well?
Too early and small to say, truthfully.
Too early, really?
Yeah, we don't see a business impact. I mean, they have a small number of cars on the road. Who knows? They, among others, will be, look, there are going to be a lot of winners in the self-driving space. A lot of people who come up with their own technology, their own approaches. If you had to stack rank them in terms of miles driven, you'd put Baidu on top. If you had to stack rank them in terms of visibility in the United States, you'd put Waymo on top for sure, and they've done great work. Then there are a bunch of other great companies. Zoox is amazing. WeRide is really interesting. Pony AI is super interesting.
And how many last, though?
I don't know. Maybe 4 or 5, something like that. It won't be one. It won't be one. It's too important for it to be one.
Let me ask you a different question, and it's I felt terrible about it yesterday because we had interviewed Dara on the air and had not seen. I think the article had just been published, this piece in the New York Times yesterday about sexual misconduct by drivers, sometimes by riders, and that some of that's being tracked, but different approaches to try to deal with it. Lyft was also in that story, not to the same degree as Uber. I'm curious just what you think, what you thought of that piece, what you think of the problem, and what you think of the solutions, because one of the things in that article suggested that because both you and Uber effectively have drivers that are contractors, there's certain things that you feel that you can't do to control their behavior, and that if they were more under your control, they might be then classified as employees, but maybe would be safer.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is it was a heartbreaking article to read. Heartbreaking. And very, very difficult to read. The problem that you're identifying is a real one, which is to say, the more control we exert over drivers who are contractors, the more it puts the industry at risk for being able to serve its customers. That is a true statement. Having said that, there are things you can do, and there are things we've done. I'll give you an example. We began a product called Women Plus Connect. It was in September of 2023, about 6 months after I joined, something I was very proud of, actually. Since then, over 115 million women have taken rides with other women on the platform, and that dramatically reduces risk. So there are and that was risky, for sure. Our legal department was, had some concerns, so on and so forth, but it is absolutely the right thing to do. So look, as an industry, we have to lead on this. We can't just sort of hide behind it's only a small number, or it's complicated, or it's legally complicated. We have to lead. There may be some consequences. Those consequences may be slightly painful for us from time to time, but you know what they're not going to be? They're not going to be bad because they're going to be good for riders and good for drivers.
Do you think that it could be worth changing the model even from a safety perspective? Meaning, one of the things you kept reading in this piece was that the business, in Uber's case, but I imagine it may be your case too, decided, look, we can't put cameras in the car, for example, because we force cameras in the car, then all of a sudden these municipalities are going to say, these guys are employees of yours, and it's going to change the business model, which means that profit over purpose, right? Like that's what's going on here. I mean, that was at least the implication of the article. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree. That seems to be the conclusion that the other guys came to. I will tell you that, again, it is complicated. I don't want to minimize the complexity, but we now have a program that allows drivers to have cameras in the car. They share footage with us all the time. We've got a program that allows you to PIN verify when you get in the car. We've got a program that allows you to get one-click access to ADT. We've got a program that allows you to share your location with other people. We've got a program to allow you to choose another woman. So, look, there are things that are complicated. It is true. And this is, let's be honest, and remember, zoom out for a second, it's still a new industry. This is crazy. Rideshare, it's been around for a decade. It sounds like forever. A decade ago, it was nothing. And still people are trying to figure out, how does this thing work? It is a legitimate industry that millions of people use to make money on and to use every single day. And I hope we can collectively move forward. But I found the article absolutely heartbreaking, and I just leave it there.
David, I want to thank you for waking up early and doing this in person right here in San Francisco. It's great to see you.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Joe and Melissa, thank you. And we will see everybody tomorrow. I'll be back in New York, guys.
And that's the pod for today, this Thursday. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Thanks to Melissa Lee for sitting in. You can tune into Squawk Box weekday mornings on CNBC starting at 6 Eastern. Or get the best of our TV show right into your ears when you follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.